Today's show is brought to you by our Extra Mile community on Patreon and mpb.com for quality used camera kit with a guarantee. Buy, sell, trade and create with mpb.com. The Photowalk, you and I making some pictures with our cameras or smartphones, they count too. Sketchbooking our time as we walk together, enjoying the letters and the stories that you've sent in. Usually I make these walks first thing in the morning, but actually this one is a kind of hot off the press show, because if you're listening to this Friday morning, and of course that depends where you are in the world, I will have recorded this but hours ago, as the sun was beginning to tiptoe down and go to sleep for the night. So I'm along one of my familiar paths, and it's one of those paths where I say, oh God, the triffids are growing up around me, but somebody's been along and they've chopped through the whole thing. So yeah, I'm not battling the plants, but it's released thousands upon thousands of insects and bugs, and oh, you're never happy, Neil. No, it's just an observation, that's all. I think I shall have to add to my checklist insect repellent, for sure. Right, let me make a picture, a sketchbook image to start the show. It's a nice long path, and towards the end, I might have to underexpose by maybe a stop. Towards the end, there's a light break. I'm going along. Well, it's covered by the canopy of trees, this particular part of the path, but further on, we can see sky through through or from the path, and that's what I want to try and get in the distance. Here we go. F4, shutter speed 1/2. There we go. A sketchbooker to start the show. The astute ears will notice this week I've made a few twizzles to the show. We're getting to the letters a little quicker from the off for starters, although all in all, these really are just twizzles. Subtle late spring cleaning. And from next month, there'll be some new features. For instance, our friend Valerie Jardin is going to do some short street and candid pieces for us on the second Friday of each month. Of course, the first Friday rather of the month is the assignment from our guests, and then we're going to start adding some more regular guests in for the third and fourth weeks. You might have an idea. I don't know. Write to me. I'm all ears, as you know. Well, that person that was cutting back the undergrowth seemed to have stopped. And this next bit, I feel like I'm back in the jungle again. Cue song. Right, on the show today, the lights are off in the Himalayas, thoughts about making day trips to hell, and a show page challenge to see if you really can identify deep fake. Surely you can work out what's real and not real. I mean, come on, you're an intelligent person, but then AI is getting scarily good, isn't it? I mean, could you even tell if my voice is real at the moment? Who's to say that I didn't train up ChatGPT to learn my voice, and I'm actually down the pub reading some more royal revelations and stories about car chases? It's perfectly plausible. I mean, what is real, he says, with a glint in his eye. Good question, Neil. I shall have a go at the quiz later on. My word, this is getting overgrown. And this is becoming a theme of the start of the show. Oh, Sweden. We did well with that, didn't we, last week? I told you. Last week, we revealed 24, possibly more hours beforehand, that Sweden would win the Eurovision Song Contest. And bingo, they did. So well done, Sweden. Our teleporter is clearly working, our time teleporter. And there's a very touching story today about how photography has brought one of our writers back from a very, very dark place. Marissa Roth often says, who's one of our friends on this show, and she was a guest last week, of course, that you go into life with an open mind and an open heart, letting things happen, trusting your instinct. And I think this letter is perfectly about that. So all that is on the show, and halfway through our walk, something newish. We'll find a bench which is going to be impossible on this particular walk. It'll have to be a figurative bench. Take out the famous, not so famous flask, sit down, break open the Garibaldis together and take a couple of minutes with Leon Droby and Randy Bullerwell, who are friends from the Extra Mile community and my Shooting the Breeze guests this week from Wednesday's show, The Extra Mile, which is now out. And there's a quote within the piece I'm going to play you today that may help you take better pictures. And actually, there is a teleporter question, a time teleporter question, to see which moment in history one of our friends may like to play over. And my guest today, I'm very, very much looking forward to introducing you to my guest. He is the architect behind 1,000 True Fans, the essay, an essay that we've mentioned, we've talked about before. I know I've eulogized about it. It's an essay that's aimed at creators to suggest that even in this day and age of wanting millions of followers and likes and thumbs up and adulation, that in reality, the ability to be able to work and have others fund your work can come from a much, much smaller and more invested, with a capital and lowercase I, a group of fans or friends or followers, or insert other words starting with the letter F here. So yes, Kevin Kelly is my guest. He's been jotting down bits of advice he wishes he'd known earlier in his life. Each one is like a tweet, he says, a wisdom tweet. 450 he's come up with in this book, this TEDx speaker, this futurist, this artist, this photographer. He wears many, many hats. They're all in this pocket-sized book called Excellent Advice for Living. So here's just a taster of what's to come.
Today on the Photowalk.
On the day before I die, I can say that I've truly become myself. People are not going to talk about my Vanishing Asia books. They're not going to talk about all the blog posts I wrote. They're not going to talk about 1,000 True Fans. They're going to talk about the kind of person that I was, whether I was kind, how I made people feel. That's what you get at the eulogy of the departed. That's what people remember. That's the most important thing.
And just before we walk, an important thank you to mpb.com, a great way to buy and sell and trade used camera gear online. And I know this because I use them myself to buy quality new-to-me kit, like lenses and camera bodies and other accessories. And if you're buying, you get peace of mind with a 6-month guarantee. If you're trading or selling, well, MPB will send a courier to pick up your kit on a day you specify. And once it's arrived back at the warehouse and they've gone through the checks to make sure it's been graded properly, you get paid direct into your account quickly. mpb.com is a really easy-to-use website, and it's helping photographers to buy quality used kit or sell gear you no longer need to free up some cash and give others a chance to make their stories. Go to mpb.com and I'll have a link on today's show page. Right, checklist out. Coffee and Garibaldis and walking boots, check, definitely. I tell you what you will need, but it's not in your bag. For the future, insect repellent. Not really check. Let's start the walk. I was out walking with Sir Barkalot. He's not here this week. Just as well, he would be buried in this by now. I wouldn't be able to see him. There'd be just a little tail sometimes wagging. But I was out with Sir Barkalot this morning, and I met somebody who leads these birdsong, these dawn birdsong walks, and she was teaching me the sounds of birds. And I'm now waiting for the birds that she taught me about, so that I can come across as all very knowledgeable in the wilds. But at this time of night, I think they've all gone to sleep. Chiff-chaff was one I hear a lot. The chiff-chaff. It makes well, I'm not going to do I tell you what, I'll wait for a chiff chaff either this week or in a week. Oh, don't do that. Partridge just leapt out in front of me. Or in a week to come. And I'll say, yeah, there we go. There's a chiff chaff for you. And you'll be very impressed and say, oh, that Neil, starting to get to know his... it's only taken him 2 years, but 3 years. He's getting to know his bird sounds. And there's actually the chiff chaff is it's known as a French word as well, because it makes a noise like cash. I'll wait. If the chiff chaff makes an appearance, I'll let you know. Last week's show drew much feedback, in particular the photo story Giles Penfound told, his day trips to hell story. Pictures I'm so proud to have him as an amazing friend, and he's one of the former heads of photography in the British Army, and he told about the travels he personally made to concentration camps. About a decade ago, wasn't it, this particular photo story, maybe more, that he made. And he stepped out of the sort of conventional pictures that are often made at these horrific places. So some light and shade, really, in feedback terms. And I'll start with the lighter side. Andrew Hardacre dropped me a line following one of the travel stories that we had last week. And this one was from extra miler Duncan Ferguson, who shared some thoughts and pictures from his adventures in the mountainous region of Nepal. So from Andrew, my Nepal story, Neil, I went there a while back, and my first stop was the Hotel Himalaya. Sounds like a theme hotel, Andrew. That's not your style. I checked in and went up to my room. This was mid-afternoon. I dumped my bags on the floor and tried to turn the light on. Click. Nothing happens. Click, click, click. I still can't make any of the lights come on. Nothing appears to work, it seems. The lights, the plugs. I walk down to reception and say very politely, "Excuse me, I don't seem to have any power in my room." The girl behind the desk looks at me, bemused, and calmly replies, looking at me as if I've gone completely mad, "No, sir, of course you don't. It's Thursday." I should have realised. See? Different world, isn't it, Andrew? Oh, quite literally. And then Michael Mixon. I'm making you one of our letter writers in residence, I think. The letters, the thoughts, the comments that you've been leaving on the... Oh, dear, let me just... I've got to wipe the creepy crawlies off my face. Oh, dear. The letters and the stuff that you've been leaving following the shows of late. Inspired, truly. He had something to say about the day trips to hell story. I re-listened, says Michael, to your conversation with Giles last week and was struck by a couple of things. One is just how important context is to the power of a photograph, and how we rarely have any context, that is, when casually viewing photographs, especially when we look at them online. While some of Giles's images would have caught my eye due to their composition, others I know I would have just, passed over. The photo of the leaves in particular comes to mind. On its surface, it's just a simple photograph of leaves on the ground. But when I heard Giles explain why he took that photo and what it meant to him, it caused me to look at it much more deeply and really think about the significance of those particular leaves in that particular place. Really powerful stuff. Just so that makes sense, I'll play back an excerpt from our chat in a moment so you can understand what Michael and, of course, Giles was referring to. The second, says Michael, was a memory of my own feelings when I visited Auschwitz as a student in the 1990s, how quickly I went numb, unable to process the sheer scale of the horror that took place in the same places I was now walking, on lanes and through buildings that, without known history and barbed wire, could have easily been passed off as lower income housing, which, if memory serves, they actually were in some Nazi propaganda. Now that, Michael, I did not know. I did read myself, though, that the word evacuated was stamped into passports as Jewish communities were taken from their homes. So I read that. That was what was stamped in the passports. And more recently, I read that many of these These hideous places were also painted at the time as retirement resettlements. I'll let you think about that for a second. Michael also says, I recall being stunned by the presence of a refreshment stand just outside Auschwitz, with a line of tourists waiting to get a currywurst and pommes. I fully subscribe to the view that Giles expressed, that we don't know the world another person carries with them when they casually encounter us, and therefore should refrain from snap judgment. But a sausage stand outside a former concentration camp struck me as unequivocally soul deaf. Yes, I agree. It was a very powerful episode, that, actually. So thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Michael, and others that wrote in. I sense that I'll have more letters in the coming weeks, perhaps, to read about that particular episode, and I'll link to it, even though it was just last week. Let me link to it on the show page again this week. And I'll play back a few moments from the show last week when Giles recounted making pictures of leaves on the ground.
How does one represent in images what happened there? But not only what happened there, but the feeling of what these places are today. And you cannot escape the absolute insane brutality. And this picture is actually taken at Bergen-Belsen, where there's very, very little of the original camp left, because it was torched because of disease and all this, pretty much after it was liberated. But so how do you represent that? How do you, they have graves there. It says that there are 2,000 people buried here, 3,000 people buried there. How do you get an idea of what that looks like? And then what I realized was that how do I represent those people? And in not only this picture, but in a lot of other pictures, it became about very ordinary things. And, there's more people in the ground than there are leaves on the ground. And so it becomes, it's not a direct representation, but in a way it's for me saying, here's something incredibly ordinary. They're just leaves. They're just leaves on some stone. But is it different? Do they become different because they're at Bergen-Belsen? This place is infused with human cells. Okay, so those trees would have grown, feeding off the bodies that were in the pits. So are they bits of human cells?
Were you thinking of this metaphor and this as you were making this picture?
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, absolutely. So you walk, in not only in this picture, but there's another picture I have of, it's of a brick wall. And when I had the exhibition for this, there was no captions on it. There was a booklet which you had to read afterwards. And people go, well, it's just a brick wall. And I say, yes, it's not just a brick wall. That's the crematorium, back of the crematoria at Sachsenhausen. Then all of a sudden, when I look at these, they're just leaves. And but then when you say, yeah, but these are leaves from an oak tree that grew in the remnants of people, and all of a sudden, for me, it made a big difference.
Giles Penfound, and as I said a moment ago, I'll link to his episode from last week on the show page today. I found a clearing, and I feel like I want to remain in this clearing. I was being buzzed just now by something. God knows what it was, but it was truly annoying. I thought, I'm going to have to run. I have to make a run for it. It's Mental Health Week this week, so it seems entirely appropriate that we have a letter about the mind and photography and walking. I got sent a short quote, actually, to read to you about mental health only yesterday. Mental health problems do not define you. They are something you experience. You walk in the rain and you feel the rain, but importantly, you are not the rain. Matt Haig, extraordinary quote. Matt, that is. So here's a letter to go with this from Nick Elderby. Nick, you sound like a wonderful summer wine. Elderby wine, perfectly served with a Shopska salad. Hi Neil, love the show, etc. Do I need to go and hide behind the sofa? The imaginary sofa, obviously, in the countryside here, Nick. This sounds like flattery. You know I can't handle flattery. I'm I'm not very good at flattery. I haven't made a picture for a while. I do need to. I've just seen, you know what I'm like for, Nick, sorry, I'm digressing. You know what I'm like for trees that seem to be consumed by other plants, ivy in particular, but by these quite aggressive other plants around them that seem to be squeezing them, but they coexist together. I've got one here. This is perfect. Sorry, Nick. Hold on to your thoughts for a second. I'm going to do a look up in the air picture. We haven't done a look up picture for a while, have we? What was it? My friend, I'm going to call him mentor, actually, because I feel he was. Steve Shipman said, look up, didn't he? Look up. Because there's so much you can tell in a photo story sometimes by looking up. There we go. That growth seems to be, God, dear, it's reaching right up to the very top branches. There's this tree. And I've just got a fly in my ear. Hold on. This is ruining a moment where I was trying to be perfectly descriptive. It's falling apart, isn't it? Nick, love the show. I'm not sure you will now. I'm conscious that you've had a lot of photography and the mind stories of late, but I thought I'd recount mine, which has at least a positive outcome. Perhaps I should start with a confession. I do very occasionally listen to other photography podcasts, and not just the one with your mate Mullins. I listened to an interview with a French heart surgeon and photographer, and it was she who described photography as a medicine. Nick, I meant to write to you, and hopefully by the time this show gets published, because I have dropped you a mail now, you'll be able to send back what that podcast was, because number one, it sounds like a fascinating podcast that I should share and let others know about. Number two, I should love to talk to this French heart surgeon and photographer. I think she'd make a fantastic guest. I was brought up, says Nick, in a keen photography family. My grandfather was a Leica man. Sadly, I didn't inherit that. My father was more of the keen amateur, forgetting to put the film in for the whole summer holiday, sort of keen amateur. I was given a Kodak Brownie Vectra at a very young age, and it took 120 film, and I still have some of those black and white photos in a box in the attic some 55 years later. Terrific. You should definitely go and dig those out. Come on, send some of those in. Let's see what your younger eye was making photographically. Anyway, as I grew into my teens, I just became totally obsessed with playing sport. I was a particularly keen rugby player, but just before going to university, I don't like the sound of where this is going, I managed to break my arm spectacularly playing rugby. And having it put back together with plates and screws, I spent 18 months, my word, 18 months in plaster. Keen to support the lads, I'd turn up each week, and eventually I borrowed my father's old Praktika and persuaded him that he needed a 135mm lens. That's good persuasion techniques. I took some half-decent photos, and during the long summer vacations, I'd get a job. Whatever happened to students getting a job for the summer, he says. Mine only asks where I'm going to pay for them to go. Yes, you're quite right. And I saved up for my pride and joy a Canon AE1 and then eventually the ultimate Canon A1. I did my summer jobs. I had a few. They were quite varied. The one I remember most was car cleaning at FC Green's garage in Hertford. No longer there. I looked it up. Tried to find some old vintage pictures of the place, but nothing really seems to exist. Proof again that really making those photographs of the most ordinary places is going to be special to somebody, somewhere, someday. I should have made them myself. I know you're looking at me over your glasses as I say that. I spent many hours in the university darkroom, he says, and came to love the whole black and white process. Still, as life tends to, jobs devour most of your time, families come along to devour the rest, and probably the biggest culprit was the smartphone. Why dig out your proper camera when you've got a perfectly good camera in your back pocket? Roll forward a good few years and a hateful job, says Nick. a heart attack, oh my word, long COVID, very nearly dying of sepsis, and a failed marriage left me in a very, very dark place. This lasted a long time. Eventually, however, one day, I decided to take action, starting with opening the curtains and getting out walking to get a bit fitter. To pass the time, I started listening to podcasts, and then I came across the Photowalk, all by an accident. Well, I'm glad we found each other, Nick. I really am. From the first episode, I was hooked. My word, that's 381 episodes ago. And we've changed a lot in that time, haven't we? I devour the back catalogue on my walks in the Surrey Hills. At your suggestion, I dug out an old Canon 40D, which I'd inherited from my late father-in-law, and took this with me. And one Saturday afternoon, lost as usual, I stumbled out of the woods to find myself on the touchline of a local village football match. Well, I stayed for a while, enjoying the game. I took a few shots, even though I didn't have the proper kit. When I downloaded the frames that evening, there were a couple that I quite liked, and I emailed them to the coach and thought nothing more about it until I received a reply to say he really liked the shots and that their regular photographer had to give up. And would I like the job? Well, since then, I've been their regular photographer, have improved with practice, upgraded my gear, all, of course, with the help of mpb.com. I'm glad you're flying the flag, Nick. I can honestly say that the £40 a game gives me far more satisfaction than the thousands of pounds doing hateful jobs over the 40 years. I absolutely have fallen in love again with photography. I've tried a bit of landscape, but with limited success. Had a bit more success, in my eyes at least, with some street photography. But to come back to sport, a genre you've not spent much time on, Mr. James, the UK does produce some of the finest proponents in the world. You're right. And, well, you're right. a doubly there. Yes, there are some fine sports photographers in the UK. There are some fine photographers all around the world shooting sport. And yes, you are also right that we haven't really covered that as a genre. I can't remember the last time. I suppose surfing. We've covered quite a lot of surfing. Usually with surfing interviews, it ends up with me saying, what happens if a shark turns up? I don't seem to be able to help myself with that question. But you're right, sports photography. I shall go look some people up. All of this, says Nick, is a long way of coming back to the French heart surgeon. Photography has literally put me back on my feet and had more benefit than the endless pills. The Photowalk should be available on the NHS and top of any GP's list of treatments. I know it's free, but you know what I mean. Keep up the treatments, Dr. James. Well, I've never been called doctor before. Yours gratefully, Nick. Thank you, Nick. Really, from the bottom of my heart, the honesty of this letter, it really does touch me. It does, and it reminds me of just how many wonderful friends that we have out there in this wider community of the Photowalk and the extra mile atop that as well. And it's honestly, it's a privilege to make this programme. I do so love spending these walks with you, these walks with photographers and non-photographers. I noticed that we're getting a lot more walkers now listening to the programme around the world. So, yeah, thank you so much for your mail. And I sense, Nick, that you and I are going to take a walk in those there Surrey Hills that you frequent, maybe a tad later on this year. Send your stories, like Nick, to the email address, which is stories@photowalk.show. If you're sending pictures as well, 2,500 pixels wide, please. If you can't do that, don't worry. I'll do the heavy lifting for you. Haven't said that for a couple of weeks. But you don't have to send pictures in. If you've got a story like Nick, then equally I'd love to hear from you. What photography, what walking, what mental health and photography, as that partnership means to you. Right. Time for our guest. It's a real honour to talk with this man. It really is, because I've known about him and his work for a long, long time. It was Lynn Fraser, thank you, Lynn, that spotted that he was doing the interview rounds at the moment and talking to podcasters. And so I leapt immediately to my keyboard and whipped an email off to Kevin, who graciously replied and said that he'd have a chat with me. So I've been an admirer of his 1,000 True Fans principle for a long time. And it's something that's actually guided me in my thoughts to have this show be a long-term thing. That's what our extra mile is all about on the Wednesday. But by the by, he's written a book. Well, he's written several books, actually, but the latest is the one we're going to talk about today mainly, although I will touch on one of his other books, one of his photographic books. And it's an incredible undertaking, this book. You'll find out why very soon. So this week, a photographer, an explorer, I would say, an artist, a TED Talk speaker, a thinker, an essayist, insert many other things here. Somebody very special to listen to together as we walk. It's Kevin Kelly. Kevin, before we start, although this perhaps features as a sub-theme within the book we're talking about today, I'm intrigued. How does somebody travel, even in the 70s, for an entire year across Asia, or years? So this is accommodation, tickets to ride, food, clothing, film, which in the end resulted in 36,000 slides, which has become a book in themselves we'll talk about. How do you do that on a budget of $2,500 a year?
Well, you travel back to the time machine. You go back to 1972, where everything was a lot cheaper. I tell you, Asia was incredibly affordable for someone coming from the West at that time. You could live on a few dollars a day. So I was thrifty, but there was no superpower. I was traveling, staying in kind of dormitory style hotels, eating at the local restaurants, drinking whatever people were drinking, water, and then taking, buses. And so that was actually doable. I was living at the local level, which was pretty raw. I was doing that in order to photograph the street, to kind of get the low level atmosphere, what was happening, and then going remotely into the villages where it was also very, very cheap. That's not, of course, possible today.
Oh, also, another thing that's perhaps not possible today is some of the countries, some of the places, some of the regions that you visited. Now, is that one of the reasons for the title of Vanishing Asia?
So I did, after 50 years of travel in Asia, starting, as you suggested, in my early 20s when it was very cheap and I had very little, to more recently where I have more resources and I could maybe travel places that I could not before, including traveling with my family at times and photographing. What I was visiting, what I was collecting, were images of the culture that was disappearing. So it wasn't so much that you couldn't go there. It's just that having gone there and having been exposed to the West, those cultures have been rapidly changing, and traditions and ceremonies and costumes that they wore even on my first visit, they're not doing anymore. They're not wearing anymore. And so this book is kind of a ode to the old ways in Asia, many of which are disappearing, not all of them. And I was lucky enough to have been there at a moment when it was like someone like me with very little money could make an expedition, so to speak, and capture it. And some of those things have since disappeared.
Did you travel to photograph, or did photography find you on your travels?
Yeah, I started traveling to photograph, and I wanted to be a National Geographic photographer, and I was working with them to try and become one, showing them my work. I had published eventually in other magazines, but I was really kind of putting my hopes on becoming a National Geographic photographer. I didn't follow through long enough to do so, but that was my dream. And so I set off photographing in Asia, and I decided to kind of do my own project rather than be a professional photographer. So I put it on the kind of the passion track rather than the vocation track. It was a compulsion. It was a compulsion where I would just, when I was traveling, I was working. I was hard to travel with in a certain sense because I was working all day long trying to photograph certain kind of things, waiting at a particular spot, feeling very sure that something was going to happen there, that I could get this picture, could see in my mind, and I would wait for that. And while other people were waiting for me, that's very uncomfortable. So that was my passion, my compulsion. oftentimes in the beginning, I was the only person with a camera within 100 miles.
Yeah.
The very early days, having a camera was very, very, very rare in the host countries. And for some areas, I was the first person with a camera there. And so it's a little bit different today than when your phone's a camera and you can just immediately pull one out. Back then, you had to deliberately stock up on film, which took up a lot of space and was very expensive and very fragile, and you couldn't see whether you had the picture or not. You're just hoping that you got what you were after. You wouldn't know until much later. And so that was the adventure of it.
Technology, futurism, photography, travel, writing, speaking. It's very difficult, actually, Kevin, to know what to talk to you about, because I know that today we have a brief and I want to come to your latest book. I'm looking forward to it in a moment. But you have what I refer to as a very tentacular approach to life and work. Would one of the pieces of advice that we're going to talk about later be not to put all your eggs in one basket? Though I know you'd probably reinvent that rather hackneyed expression. Well, I suppose I might be asking here, who is Kevin Kelly? Which of all your skills, all these things you practice, all these things you do, these things you've seen, are you most comfortable with being described as?
Yeah, it is kind of hard to figure out what connects them. But I think what I am best at and I find easiest to do and have kind of done for a long time is present ideas and things in a form where there's text and images. And that was, in some ways, what magazines were.
Yeah.
And so because of my background as photography and in art, I thought in those kinds of terms because of my interest in systems and ideas and words. I always was thinking in terms of images plus text, which was magazines. My dad worked for magazines. I was a magazine junkie. I grew up in magazines. Even when I was traveling, I had very little money. I still would buy the Time magazine on the newsstand. That was my one luxury. The idea of thinking in terms of magazine pages and then, later to web pages and then eventually maybe even to video. That combination was something that connects a lot of the things that I was doing. So I think I'm a kind of a born editor, born presenter, a born packager of ideas. The writing part is actually tough for me. It's actually hard.
Yeah.
I really I'm a reluctant writer. It's really painful.
I would not have thought that.
Yeah, well, there's lots of drafts. So that first draft is a killer for me. I just really have hard trying getting it out. But once I have it out, then I can start editing it, which is really fun. And that's what I love. So a lot of my writing is a result of editing, which and by the way, I always hire editors to work on my, to do my books. Besides the editor that I have in New York, I actually hire my own editor before I give it to them because I need editing. Yeah. And I believe in that value of having other people look at it from outside and help you structure things.
I think most people could do with an element of editing in their life, couldn't they?
Yes, we should have editors all our lives.
Yeah. Some people bury this within their personal history. You positively dine out on the fact that you are, and I'm using your words now, the result of dropping out. Though that journey's probably the best advert for dropping out I can possibly find.
And actually dropping out now is considered kind of cool. But when I was dropping out, it was very close to a sign of failure. What happened was I dropped out after 1 year in college, and I actually regret having gone to that 1 year. What I needed at the time was what we would now call a gap year, or even an internship, which were not available, were not options at that time. And I just needed to do something like a project other than sit in the classroom for grade 13. I needed to do something. And these days, that's what kids do, is they take a gap year and travel around, or they work in an internship where they actually can work on a project. That was exactly what I was looking for, but couldn't find it. So the alternative was dropped out, and I did. And kind of did my own internship and my own gap year that turned to a gap decade or two. And so I think the impulse is there now, and kids that need that have that choice, which is, I think, just fabulous. They can go back, and I'm sure if had been those options available, I probably would have completed it, or maybe I should have gone to art school. I don't know. But the point is that I think after 12 years of sitting in a classroom, you should be doing something. You should be trying stuff out, not just studying more. And that's my recommendation of prototyping your life to someone setting off. Like before you go to law school, intern at a law office to see what life is like doing law, because you may surprise you. You may not decide you want to be a lawyer or a doctor or whatever it is. That's the beauty of kind of trying these things out to see what a day-to-day life is like.
Well, out of that 450 pieces of advice, which we will come to, prototyping your life is one of the really important ones for me. So I'll come back to that. You are a professional optimist, and that optimism has been a theme throughout your life. Does that strong sense of optimism still pervade through your being now, what you do now?
I am more optimistic now than ever been, and a part of it's actually been deliberate. So you say I'm professional, and like a professional, I'm getting better at being an optimist. So I am increasingly more optimistic about the world. Yeah. And that's based on the fact that I know more about the world. I know more history now than when I was younger. And a lot of my optimism comes from history, from the general trends that we've been on and are still on. And my optimism also comes in part from becoming aware of our ability to create. So I would say my optimism is somewhat based not on the fact that I think our problems are smaller than we think, but that our ability to solve problems is greater than we think. And thirdly, I think our optimism comes in a way, I think there's a moral obligation in a certain sense, because it is only by imagining a world that we would want and believing that it's possible, which is optimism, can it happen? Because I don't think we can make a future that's desirable and complicated and filled with all these things and do it inadvertently. I think we have to have a picture of where we're going. We may not get there, but something to lead us and to believe that it's possible to get there. And looking back today into the past, we realize that all the great things we have, from the iPhone to electric cars, were all created by people who believe that these impossible things were possible. Yeah. So they were. So our present has been shaped by optimists, and that's who's going to shape the future. I like that idea that you suggest that we have an obligation to be optimistic. As optimistic as we possibly can. It's not ignoring our problems. We actually embrace those, because the problems are the propulsion of progress. They're kind of opportunities in disguise. And so there is not a Pollyanna of ignoring the problems. It's saying we have incredible capabilities, increasing capabilities to solve problems. Those solutions will make new problems. So it's not a problemless vision. It's just saying we can move forward, and we don't need very much of a delta. We cannot have just a few percent better than what we destroy, and then we can have compounded aggregate over time. That few percent difference, that few percent optimism can actually lead to progress. I smile slightly wryly when you talk about our solutions becoming perhaps a problem, because two letters that keep appearing at the moment within the news and the letters that I receive into the show are the two letters that are AI. Is it to be feared or to be embraced? You're an optimist. You're a futurist. Sure. No, it's 100% to be embraced, and embraced in both in a very, very particular way, meaning you, the audience, the listeners, need to use it to determine your own opinions about it. It's unbelievable to me the number of people who have opinions about it who haven't used it. And secondly, we collectively need to use these tools in order to steer them. The only way we get to steer the technologies is through use. And by that, I mean is that AI is so complicated. It's so many things. It potentially could go in so many ways that the only way we can actually figure it out, what it is actually useful, what it actually is harm, is through use. There's a thing called thinkism, which is, middle-aged guys who like to think that thinking about things will bring solutions, or they can figure out things. We actually have to use them. all the things about the AIs being touted today, none of those capabilities, either the plus or minuses, were envisioned by the people inventing it. They just couldn't, you can't tell. You have some ideas about what it might do, and it doesn't do those, but does other things. And that is only revealed through use. So we collectively have to use these in order to steer them, and individually, you need to use them in order to decide what you think about them. So that's what I would call embrace these technologies and listen to them.
I came across your work a good few years back now, down to your incredible essay, your theory, the 1,000 True Fans essay. And I couldn't possibly have you on here without asking you a question or two about that work. This essay, this work comes... well, way before crowdfunding, actually. You were in every way the futurist that you're known for being. Do you mind? I'd rather hear the theory from you than me said, and then ask you questions about it, because actually it's a bit of a treat for me.
So when I wrote 1,000 True Fans, it was a theory, meaning that I was saying, I don't know anybody who's doing this, but theoretically this would be possible. And what it is that traditionally, if you were a creator, and that could mean you're a photographer or a writer or a filmmaker or inventor or a sculptor, that you needed to have a fairly large fan base audience to be successful.
Yeah.
So we talked about blockbusters and bestsellers and platinum. You know, your idea of success for a musician would be to go platinum, sell millions of these. What we know from the music business, oftentimes a lot of people who are platinum, even they still weren't making very much money at times, because the labels and the studios and the publishers were taking most of those profits. And so it occurred to me that with the advent of the new technology, social media, email, all these other things, that if a creator had direct engagement with their audience, their fans, and you got all the money that they were spending on you directly to you, that you needed far fewer than millions of fans to have a kind of success. And so I did the calculations and said, well, you know, if you had true fans, and true fans were people that would buy anything you produced, they would go to any performance or concert within 200 miles. They'd buy the hardcover, the soft cover, and the audible version of your books. They would buy the box sets and the signed sheets, and they were true fans. If you had only 1,000 of them, and they were spending $100 a year, then you'd have $100,000, and that's not a fortune, but it's a living.
Yeah.
And if you were a duet, you have to multiply by 2. They're the usual things. Or if they can only give you $50, then you multiply by 2. But the idea was that the order of magnitude in this was thousands and not millions. This was before Kickstarter and Patreon and stuff.
Yeah.
There was a couple that were just starting out. And so I was saying, well, I think this is possible. And then, of course, over time, it's been proven that it's possible. And there's many, many, many people who start that way and are able to, you know, kind of bootstrap into success of their own definition based with going to 1,000 true fans. And of course, those are just the true fans. The 1,000 true fans become some of your best marketers to the casual fans, which are, you know, kind of like another circle around there. So you have more than just the true fans, but the true fans are the core. So anyway, since that time, 2008, there's been a lot of tools, including Kickstarter and Patreon and others, that have enabled almost any creator to try this out and begin. And the thing about this is that there's a cost to it. The cost is that engaging with your fans is not a full-time job, but it's a big job.
It's time rich.
It's very, very time intensive to engage with your fans.
Yeah.
And not everybody is suited for it. Not everybody has the personality for that. And there are a lot of creators who don't want to do that. They just want to paint, or they want to photograph, or they want to knit. So, and then eventually people may move out and they are willing to have the publishers and the studios and labels take their cut because they have a large enough audience, and that's fine too. But the point is that while it may not be for everybody, and it may not be where you end up, it's a great way to start.
Yeah.
if you can, because those barriers are really low for starting out.
It's extraordinary, and it must be very satisfying to see the amount of videos, the amount of blog posts that say, oh, you should listen to this Kevin Kelly guy. He's written this 1,000 True Fans. I mean, the success of that essay, I'm sure you wouldn't have thought on the day you wrote it that it was going to turn out quite like it is. And life being this wonderful circle, it's actually worked for you too. Because that principle funded the release of the book we were talking about right at the start, Vanishing Asia.
That's right. So I've done that was my second Kickstarter, and Vanishing Asia at that time was the second highest nonfiction book that was done on Kickstarter. It was very successful. It did enable me to reach 1,000 true fans who really appreciated the kind of laborious work. And just to describe these books, these were immense, oversized, overweight, 3 volumes, 30 pounds, 9,000 images in the books, 9,000 captions. It was kind of crazy. So, and that was because there were enough fans. But the interesting thing was I was talking about the 1,000 True Fans for a while before I wrote it down, just trying it out. And one of the reasons I write is oftentimes I don't have the ideas in my head until I write them. So I had kind of a vague idea about it, but it was the writing of the essay that actually crystallized the ideas. And I find that that's why I write, and that's also why it's very painful, is the kind of thinking. I write in order to think. I know from working at Wired and hiring writers, there are a lot of writers who have ideas and they just have to put them down on paper. For me, it's not that way. For me, I don't have the ideas until I try and write them down. And then they come out. That process, forcing the words out, generates the ideas. It's really weird, but that is how it works for me, and that's why it's so painful for me to write.
And Kevin Kelly returns for the second part of our chat very, very soon. Have you been walking anywhere of late that you'd like to share with us? Some pictures of where you are in the world. It's super to reach around the globe and see where you're walking. And hear stories about where you're walking as well, and stories of your life as a photographer. Send those to stories at photowalk.show, stories at photowalk.show. And if you're sending pictures in, as I said about, 10, 15 minutes ago, 2,500 pixels wide, please, if you can possibly resize them. Our show here is made possible by our incredible patron community of extra milers who meet for our regular members Zoom show at the start of each month. Plus, every Wednesday, there's an extra Photowalk show called The Extra Mile. You go the extra mile for me, so I'm going the extra mile for you. And the great thing is, you are the stars of this particular show. We hear about your adventures, photographic, yes, but equally your very inspirational life stories. We've had some terrific life stories over the last month or so. This week, my guests are from America Land. It's Leon Droby, who's a musician amongst other things. We'll talk about that. And then I asked my roll of 12 questions, or rather posed them to a former guest from Aruba Land, Randy Bullerwell. Here's a little of our conversations, just to whet your appetite.
On this week's Extra Mile.
The quote, and the reason, I guess the reason that I kind of key on it is because you hear hundreds of quotes all the time, and then, half an hour later, how many can you remember? And for me, it's, as soon as I heard it, I never forgot this. And it was, if you want to take more interesting pictures, be a more interesting person. So I am kind of predisposed to kind of sit in the house and work on the art of being a couch potato and, walk around the yard and that type of thing, which I don't think is at all healthy, for me anyways. And I noticed since I've been doing photography, if I look at what I am creating, I can pretty much parallel how my life is going. So if I try every morning just to do an hour of creativity, get on the computer and just process pictures and print. I believe in printing. When I learned photography but with film, it was right after I learned how to use the camera, I learned how to use the darkroom, and the two have always been joined. So to me, the camera is 50% and the darkroom is 50%. You know, I can look at what I'm working on, and if it's just like, this is a lot of rubbish, what was the last couple of weeks like? And I'll realize that really nothing. I'm not putting myself out. I'm not doing things. I'm not active.
With a teleporter, Randy, right now, take yourself to one of the most fantastic places in the world. You only have 60 minutes on the clock, though. Where's it going to be?
That was an easy one for me to answer. And I'm going to name drop here for the sake of, I'm very proud to have been a part of it, Freeman Patterson's Kitchen. Freeman Patterson, a well-known Canadian photographer. A lot of people know Freeman Patterson.
Yes.
But not only Freeman Patterson, but in the kitchen with him was André Galland, as well as Maurice Henry. I wish I could get an hour back of that time.
Yes, this week's Extra Mile is out now. You can become an Extra Miler by clicking on the Support the Show icon on the front of the website, photowalk.show. While I have your ears, Africa 24 is now taking bookings. Yes, we're off for a holiday, stroke retreat, stroke adventure, stroke expedition, all in one exciting adventure, really, to the smiling coast of Africa, the Gambia, where we'll be spending time with the people of this wonderful, fantastic, friendly, small country on the west coast. River trips and markets and wildlife and villages, forestry, music, animals, food. It's a 10-day photo trip guided by 3 experienced photographers and filmmakers, including yours truly. Go to the link on the show page and also on the menu at photowalk.show. 3 places went in the first days of release. We have 7 places now remaining, and I sense, well, I hope you're gonna join me for this wonderful trip.
You listen to Chicanam.
We look forward to seeing you. I am covered in Berkshire Land's bugs. Dear, look at this. Look at this. Look at this sleeve. I can't see out the other side, Neil. I'm sure you can. Use a bit of imagination. Look at it. It's covered in things. I'm carrying home a zoo from this walk. I really am. Right. This next part of the show is a multimedia experience. On 2 planes, really. What you'll hear, and then reference pictures, which you'll find on the show page today. Hold on. Let me clear my face of bugs so I can read the notes. Neil, I'm starting to itch with you. Oh, sorry about that. There we go. Look, it's truly an experience that's contagious. Anyway, so here's a letter from our good friend in Germany land, Matthias Fox. It's now this is becoming a subject that I know I shall have to be careful doesn't become a sub-theme, but I will always try and come at it from a different angle of attack. And it's being talked about, really, lots in terms of a robotic, autonomous tech society of the future. And in terms of creativity, well, it's on my guest's mind today, and I dare say it's on our mind as photographers. And there was a fantastic short film made by our friend Sean Tucker about AI. I think, well, at the time I'm speaking to you, that sounds very formal. I am pretty sure it's his latest film. Having said that, he'll go and release another one. And it'll be the last but one. You'll find it. I'll tell you what, I'll pop it on the show page for you so you can watch and enjoy and comment. I know that Sean enjoys reading your comments to the films that he makes. So, I seem to be, in some respects, with this subject, rocking, swaying, if you will, between, well, concern, utter terror, and complete blissful optimism. Sean did help me with the optimism bit. It's about AI. Hi, Neil. says Matthias. I heard you talking about the implications of AI on photography. I'm an amateur photographer, and I've been so for 35 years, but I'm also interested in the current tech development. It's fascinating and scary to see what's already possible, and we're just at the beginning of this new era. For better or worse, we'll have to find a way to deal with it because it's here to stay. As someone who's interested in any form of imagery, I've tried several imaging AIs available to the public, and I will link to these on the show page today because I did go and have a sneaky glimpse at them. I haven't used them myself. I sense I'm going to dig in and see what I can do. There's Bing Image Creator, which is based on... is it DALL-E? The only thing I can think of with DALL-E is think about WALL-E, that movie. And it's free for anybody with a Microsoft account at bing.com/create. Leonardo AI, based on Stable Diffusion, whatever that is. And Mid-Journey, based apparently on nothing. It's just Mid-Journey. Before I show you some of the images, or are they photos, I'll start with a haiku about your podcast. Haiku, of course, being poetry. Written, not by me, but by ChatGPT. All right, then. What did ChatGPT manage to write for you about this podcast, then, Matt? Let's see. The Photowalk podcast. Through your lens, stories unfold, inspiring my soul. Well, that is haiku. I'll grant you that. So I was curious, says Matt, to see what these image generators can produce when asked by a prompt, which is a command line. I'm getting a nosebleed already, describing the intended image for photorealism. Here are some photographs, stroke images, stroke pictures, and I'm wondering if you can tell the AI from the reality. Over to you. In terms of the debate, as with all technology, it depends on what's done with it. It can be used or misused. Amnesty International tried to publish images from arrested protesters, for example, but there was a big storm when it was found out that some of them weren't real photographs at all. Yeah, it's an interesting news article on that, which I'll link to on the show page today. In the past decades, says Matt, we all got used to the fact that any image in public is altered in some way. France demands a visible advice when Photoshop's used, i.e. in ads. In the future, we'll have to advise our children that pictures seen in public are, well, possibly fabricated and not real at all. We'll see what will be done and what legislation will be able to control these new possibilities. Best regards from Matt in Germany land. P.S. In case you're interested in audiobooks, I can recommend Don McCullen's Unreasonable Behaviour from Audible. Well, I have the book, but I'd like to listen to it. He says the narrator is absolutely fantastic and the book is great. Well, I entirely concur. The book is great. Does he read the audiobook? Am I being daft? Matt, I am going to send you for the work that I'm about to talk about now. I'm going to send you a real, not a fake, but a real famous, not so famous flask. It's real in that you can drink real coffee from it on real cold mornings as you make your real walks to make real pictures, or maybe not real pictures, because this is what this challenge is about to reveal. I actually was talking with my reprobate buddy Mullins the other day about food photographers who are having a really tricky time with AI, because AI is turning out some just incredible food pictures. And Sean mentions within his film, actually, pictures, interior pictures, interiors. So, yeah, I think the commercial photographic industry in particular are indeed hiding behind their figurative sofas at the moment. It was a conversation we were having the other day. Kev's a member of some commercial Facebook forums. I think it was Facebook forums. And there was a lot of very worried chat going on within those forums. So then, to the challenge. Come on, Neil, the challenge. You keep talking about the challenge, but you haven't talked about it yet. I'm getting there. Patience. There are 11 images, stroke pictures, stroke photographs on the show page today that have been sent to us by Matt. And there are instructions on the feature on the show page, because I'd like you to join in with this and tell me which ones are fake and which ones are real. It's a challenge. And I'll choose one entry at human random or randomness to send a flask to. So good luck with that one. And let's listen to a few words from Sean Tucker's latest film on this subject of AI. And I'll pop the film on the show page today as well.
I think that one of the biggest concerns people have right now is with the rise of AI, they feel that they won't be able to trust what they see anymore. How will they know in a few years if something that they're looking at is a real photograph taken by a real photographer or something that was generated in a computer? Won't people just use AI to generate fake photographs instead of hiring actual photographers down the road? Or maybe unscrupulous people will use AI to deliberately generate fake photographs to spread misinformation. Well, of course, all that is true, but I don't think that's anything new. In fact, I think it's been a very long time since we can trust the images that we get shown on a daily basis. Way back in February 1990, with the release of Photoshop version 1, photographers back then were having a similar meltdown that they're having now. They were saying things like, with the release of this technology, as people get really good at using it, how will we be able to believe what we see in images anymore? This is the death of photography. But of course it wasn't. I mean, yes, it's true that a skilled Photoshop user can, and they regularly do, fool us into thinking that something that we're looking at is real when it isn't, either by taking multiple images and combining them together in clever ways in Photoshop, or taking just an original image and manipulating it so heavily on its own with the tools available that it doesn't even resemble the original image that was taken. And as consumers, we're turning around to the magazine industry and saying, we're not going to buy your magazines anymore if you're going to show us such heavily Photoshop models. We want to see real photography of real people on your covers. And the industry is listening. And even those magazines that don't listen, we know now to take that sort of cover photography with a huge pinch of salt.
Sean Tucker's film will be on the show page. It's actually, I think, probably, one of the most optimistic films or accounts made about AI that I've certainly watched of late. And I'd be intrigued to get your, as would Sean, I'm sure, to receive comments on the film of what you think about AI. And that, or those pictures, stroke photographs, stroke images, will be on the show page today. And for somebody who manages to get the most correct, I'll be sending, I'm not sure I explained it correctly before, I'll be sending a flask to you, a famous, not so famous flask for the person with the most correct answers, and I may need to draw one from a hat. Who knows? And I'll really do it properly. I'll put pieces of paper in a hat, if you like, and draw them. I'll take a picture of it. There we go. That's probably the most authentic way to enthuse to you that I'll do it properly like. Our assignment, oh, look at that. The sun's just beginning to, oh, let me get a picture. Sun's, it looked good for a second. The sun fell on my sleeve and I thought, oh, look, it's just kissing me through the trees here, but, through the leaves. I'm not sure I'm going to do this one justice. I'll give it a go. I'll underexpose by quite a lot. 2/50th, underexposed by 2 stops, f4. Actually, if I want to get a burst, I need to really go at f8 here. It might be working. You sort of have to dance around a little bit. Dance around like the mayflies. Oh, another one. I don't know. It's slightly overcast now. It's a beautiful day earlier. There's a danger of a bit of blur in terms of sky coming towards us. Right, assignment. Yes, assignment time. This month, it's from Steve Reeves. Now, Steve set I'm going to play you the Steve actually talking about the assignment. It's only a short piece. We played it once already this month, but I think he'll explain it suitably well. It's his assignment after all. But I'm going to Bath. If you're listening to this on the day of release, I'm in Bath today with Neil Ford, who is head of all that IT stuff. He's the one that's in charge of rebooting anything in my life, definitely. And I think one of my challenges to you, Neil, because you might be listening to this as you're driving in thinking, oh no, I was hoping you wouldn't ask, is that we might have a go at this assignment. See if you and I can come up with a picture and the rest of the brief to go with this from Steve Reeves.
The Photowalk assignment.
Steve, as an assignment, I'm so pleased that you've not decided to go left field and off in a direction that didn't resemble anything we talked about within our conversation about people, because you so clearly love people. So this is, without doing too much of a spoiler, this is an assignment about those that you love.
Yeah, I think it would be a great idea to go out and, rather than just photograph someone, to actually go up and talk to them, see if you could, maybe by combining words or video or the photo, get across your experience of that encounter with those people.
Now, I want to be clear, actually, because I said those that you love. I was referring more to you with your love affair. We're talking to people and getting stories and having encounters. We're not talking about, because I think it would probably be too easy to just go and interview and take a photograph of your grandfather or your mother or something, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it'd be better. Well, it'd be nice if it was a stranger, to go up to find a stranger and to interview them. Although that is an interesting thing to do a relative as well, because again, one of the funny things from what I do, people often say children or grandchildren read what I've written about their grandparents or their parents and say, I didn't know any of this.
Wow.
Because you don't really talk about those sorts of things with your relatives. So many people have said to me, I didn't think my grandmother did that. So there could be that, just to sit down and photograph someone and just interview them and see what comes out of it.
Because you're right, because we don't interview as such with a small eye those that we love, and there are probably stories that they have that we didn't know anything about.
Yeah, so if you're not comfortable enough going up to a stranger, which is hard, definitely, maybe you could do it with a relative or someone that you do feel more comfortable with. But try and get a lot I think Instagram's, I try to stick to 2,200 characters, but I break it all the time. If you could do a little summary of your encounter with that person and try and find one thing that you can get across about them that sort of encapsulates that conversation, that would be amazing.
Fantastic. So that's Steve Reeves setting the assignment for this month. You only have a few more weeks to get them in, and I look forward to seeing what you produce. And I'll be having a go later on today myself at that one. I'm curious, by the way, our guests usually set the assignments, and they have done for quite a while now, but I'm wondering if you have an assignment, he says, turning stuff on its head in a kind of twizzled way. If you have an assignment that you think, do you know, I was once set this assignment by X, or maybe it's an assignment that you came up with yourself that you're rather proud of, then could you get in touch with me at stories@photowalk.show, because I would like to set some assignments from those who listen to this here show as well. Right, a quick mail from Catherine Cunningham. Hi Neil and all. Although I've been checking in and reading and admiring the letters and the posts and stuff, I've personally not been able to shoot part of this year due to obliterating my right wrist through my own fault of a trip and a fall. But I'm definitely on the road to mending and trying to get my wrist to work, as I have a big rodeo to photograph Thursday through Sunday of this week. Yes, you will need your wrist for that. They are extreme events, aren't they? But that's not why I'm messaging. I'd love if you would look at a Facebook page called By Bike and Boat and check out young Bob's photography. I think that he's an incredibly talented photographer, not only in composition, but he brings the feelings of what he's experiencing while framing into the photo, and it's transferring to the viewer every single time. I was really impressed along with you. His stories that he tells. I tell you what, I will leave a link. You'll need to be somebody who likes Facebook, of course, to follow that link. And in fact, no, he has a... Oh, hang on, no, because he's got a website as well. Look, I'll leave a couple of links. Note to self, leave links. Will do, Neil. They are limited on funds, so I support by purchasing some of their creative crafts, which are beautiful. If I were in the UK and anywhere near young Bob, I'd mentor him and most likely learn more from him than he would from me. If you have a chance to check him out, please do, and let me know if my admiration of his work is well placed. Admiration is well placed. Tick in box, Catherine. And yeah, I think I'm going to reach out to him as well. I'm not so sure it's an interview. Could be. I am very impressed by what he's doing, and thank you for that. It's really fantastic to see other people's work that's slightly, well, I was going to say off the beaten track. It's not really, though, because we've talked about boats and cameras and photography, and I do have my, it's Lotto Fantasy number 6194 is to own a boat and deck it out with a studio so that I can go and make podcasts. There we go. That lotto list is growing, isn't it? Right. Part 2 now of my conversation with Kevin Kelly. This is where the advice begins, although I think we've had some already. This is from his book, Excellent Advice for Living, Wisdom I Wish I'd Known Earlier. Kevin Kelly, an absolute delight to talk with him. Here's part 2. It's interesting when somebody becomes known very much for a particular piece of work when they achieve and do so many more things as you do. And until this conversation, it was knowing you for your incredible potent work of that 1,000 True Fans essay. I wonder if that's a comfortable feeling for any thinker or creative such as yourself, because you've done so much. Perhaps we come back to I've asked it once already, really. Who is Kevin Kelly? Yeah.
I am incomplete. I have an incomplete answer.
Right.
So part of what I believe, I'm on a journey that everybody else is on as well, which is on the journey so that on the day before I die, I can say that I've truly become myself. And so this idea of becoming yourself is a very, very difficult thing to achieve. Yeah. And I don't think any of us really achieve it. It's not a destination. It's kind of a general direction that we're going into. So I'm moving into this general direction of kind of realizing myself, who I am. And so, as I said, I think in part, I'm a presenter of ideas and communicator. In part, I'm an artist. I post art every day that I do, either myself or with AI these days, or things that I make. I'm a maker. I'm a father, a husband, a traveler, and a thinker. So those are all adjectives. Those are all parts of me. And I think, I would have to say what I am is just a mixture of all those parts. And my little piece of advice that I learned over the years that I wish I'd known younger was when I'm tending funerals, which I'm doing more often these days because of my age. I'm just turned 71. I listen to what people are saying about the departed, and my gosh, there's a revelation there because they're not talking about all the things that person achieved. When I die, people are not going to talk about my Vanishing Asia books. They're not going to talk about all the blog posts I wrote. They're not going to talk about 1,000 True Fans. They're going to talk about the kind of person that I was, whether I was kind, how I made people feel. That's what you get at the eulogy of the departed. That's what people remember. That's the most important thing, is actually how you treated people while you were achieving. And so that's what maybe I am focusing on most, is not any of those achievements, but my character, my role with other people's lives, my relationships. Those, I think, are really the most important things that I'm doing.
And this seems, actually, on the coattails of that, an excellent time to talk about excellent advice for living. I've picked out some that particularly struck me. Kevin, frankly, I I would quite easily have enjoyed making a box set with you where I get to unpick every single one of those. we'd have been here for a lot longer, and you will have lost the will to live.
I don't think so. I'm enjoying this tremendously.
I'm hoping that as I reveal some from the book, and these are my choices, these are the ones that particularly struck me, you could in some way attach them to your own life experiences, or maybe there's a story about them. I'm going to start with this one, which was one of my oh yes moments. And you've mentioned it already. You touched on it. So a light bulb went on that moment you mentioned this one. Prototype your life. Try stuff instead of making grand plans. Now, this is very good news for me, because I'd always considered the fact I experiment with stuff, then find myself tweaking it, or the concept, completely tweaking the concept along the way. This podcast is a good example of that. What was actually my kryptonite? But you're suggesting that maybe it's not.
Yeah, I this idea of prototyping your life is both in the literal sense and in a metaphorical sense. So in the literal sense, what I wished I'd known earlier was, because I said I make things all the time. So there is this book here, the Excellent Advice for Living, but I actually made prototype versions of it in bound books, just testing the different sizes, the different designs, which I design inside. These actually have little doodles in them, which the publisher in the end rejected. But there was a series of iterations of this, trying out and testing the different concepts of it. And when we do a kitchen remodel, I did a prototype of the entire kitchen in full-scale cardboard, like from refrigerator, boxes, stuff. Do it at the full scale. And it was just unbelievably informative about what you learn to do that. And when I'm making things, there have a term in the maker community called build one to throw away, where you actually go through the entire thing and you make a prototype version that you don't intend to keep. You intend to actually to redo it. Of course, writing a rough draft of a book, exactly that. You take the whole thing, you make the whole book, and then it's like the first draft, and that's just the first draft.
Of course.
So you can make things without prototyping, but you can't make anything really great. You need to kind of go through these iterations. And that's metaphorically also true in your life, where instead of making a commitment like, oh, I'm going to start a business and I'll write a 5-year business plan and we'll get a loan and we'll do this. The way you really want to do it is prototype it. Like if you're selling something, can I sell 5 of these things to my friends? Whatever. If I'm going to do something to manufacture something, can I make a couple of these and even give away, just as, or trying out the thing you are doing with a very, very low risk consequences. And you'll learn so much from those prototypes to then iterate towards something that you want to have a larger commitment to. So it's a way of kind of testing, experimenting, but it actually becomes part of your life in terms of even making decisions about things. And so I didn't know that when I was young. I thought the idea of like making something and then throwing it away was like, it was all I could do just to make something to completion. But then to be able to just set it aside and do it again, that was like, that's too much. But this is really the way that you have to do things to get to be great. I was always impressed by the musical Hamilton, which I think is just
superb. Yeah.
Superb. One of the great. That was workshopped for a decade. I mean, they prototyped that to greatness, just going over and over again, trying different things. It was prototyped the entire way. Yeah. And a lot of movies and things are done that way these days, where they have the storyboards and then they have the animatronic version of it. And sometimes they actually make entire films with, they call them scratch voices and other things. They're prototyped the entire way. That's the only way to make a really great thing.
I wonder whether AI will help us along that path as I'm listening to you. It's the exceptionally good prototyping tool.
It is. And that's the best way to think about it, actually. It's a prototyping tool, but it really is very, very helpful in working with you along the way and trying out ideas of charrettes, of doing alternatives, of coming up with something that you wouldn't have thought of yourself. Yeah. And so I think that's a great couching of the AI ability of the current version right now which is as a prototyping tool.
I think this is something that all creators would do well to understand, particularly in a world where we're very, very scared of thumbs downs and so on and so forth, and negative feedback. When someone tells you what ticks them off, they are actually telling you what makes them tick.
Yeah, there's another one, like, you know, you want to kind of really, when other people ignore you, really kind of inspect in your own self to see what it is.
Yeah.
Because that's often telling you about something yourself. And it is. You can tell a lot about a person by looking at what pisses them off, what they get excited, annoyed about, because it's telling you something that they're dealing with in some ways. Yeah. And they may not even know it. And that's one of my other pieces of advice, which is when someone tells you something is wrong, they're usually right. When they're telling you how to fix it, they're usually wrong.
I've attempted several times now a gratitude project, and it's worked to varying degrees, and it's perhaps more a good example of prototyping my life. But it's one of those things I think is rarely practiced well, gratitude. And you said within your book, gratitude will unlock all other virtues and is something you can get better at. And this, of course, can be something I suppose you practice mindfully, not necessarily outwardly as a sort of expression to others. It doesn't have to be a grand gesture or statement, does it?
No. In fact, I think elsewhere it said, like, you know, just writing down, you know, like a journal, a notebook, what you're grateful for that day is by far the best and the cheapest therapy ever. It's very, very rewarding. So it's not necessarily that you need to announce to people and write thank you notes, although those are never a bad thing to do. Yeah. It's internal. Yeah. I mean, the gratitude it's like, just like hate doesn't really work on other people. It's just eats away at you. The same thing, gratitude. It's like not for others, it's for yourself. It's really weird that the most selfish thing that you can do is to be selfless in gratitude with others. It's like weird. It's a paradox. The more you give away, the more you get. That's true for everybody. Mathematically, that does not add up. If everybody's giving away, getting more, where's it coming from? Yeah, well, that's the whole point, is that there's a paradox at the basis of a human situation, which is that the more you're grateful, the more you are rewarded. The less you hate, the better it is for you. The more you give away, the more you get. Yeah. It's weird and paradoxical, but that is the truth as far as I can tell.
You started with 68 or so, didn't you? And you've ended at this much, much larger figure. I mean, some of the very pithy ones, like choose not to be outraged today, or don't be the best, be the only, trust me, there is no them. So some of these pieces of advice, were they handed to you? And has this sort of generationally come from the past so that you can push to the future? Because I know that was the original reason for the book was to give your family a gift.
Yes. So I am channeling the ancients in this for many of these, not all of them. I mean, there was lots of contemporary practical stuff that was less timeless and going to be more dated. But for a lot of it, the kinds of ones you just mentioned, I feel as if I've inherited the information, which I'm trying to put into my own words.
Yeah.
But I'm sure that I am, voicing the wisdom of the Stoics and the Bible and Confucius, although I don't know explicitly, or things that I just heard getting better in my work situation. My parents didn't say these. I didn't hear them from my parents. I might have probably heard them just around from other people. And I thought, that's a piece. And I write them down in order for me to help me remember them. And I kind of tried to compress them. I spent most of my time writing by deleting words, by trying to make these as small as possible in order to be reminders, in order to be handy so that I can repeat them to myself to improve my behavior, to make it into a habit. And so that was my desire, was this kind of books of wisdom that I wanted to reduce into this little memorable sentence, and through that sentence be able to remind myself of these. And then I realized that, I also, like my parents, didn't give our kids very much advice. We weren't an advising type of parents, but I really did feel like I would have done better myself if I had actually heard these bits when I was younger. So I decided to write them down to gift them to my children. And my children, seeing the book, or at least my son, said, I've never heard you say these, but you taught them to us.
Wow.
And I thought, okay, I'll consider that success.
Yeah. I think with the pressures of social media, that we live in this world that in one form or another is teaching us to become less patient. The sort of the want it now disease, or look at meism, which is a trait of many.
Yeah.
It's frankly tiring. So I definitely appreciated Kevin Kelly's recipe for greatness. Become just a teeny bit better than you were last year. Repeat every year. It's a recipe you can stir and it will be fine, I'm sure. Now you speak to audiences across the world. Some of the most watched TED Talks feature you, and I would imagine those audiences will contain those looking for the silver bullet of success. You are in many ways, and through other pieces of advice too, saying, just put the brakes on a little. It doesn't have to happen in a second. Take a moment.
Yes. Part of being an optimist is that you can change your time horizon.
Yeah.
So what I was saying is, like, if you're willing, it's really hard to have success in the next 5 minutes, even the next year. But it's amazing what you can accomplish if you give it 10 years. And a lot of being optimistic is having a longer view, because if you can make yourself better by 1%, then over a decade or 2 decades, that's compounded incredible amount of increase, which is able to overcome even fairly large setbacks and detours and downturns. And that's, of course, the whole point of stocks and index funds, which is you take a few percent compounded over years and you just hang on for 10 years or more, and you have a longer view. And then setbacks, depressions, recessions, they hardly even register in the long term. So that longer view is absolutely, I think, essential to better mental health and learned optimism. So child psychologists can teach your kids to be optimistic, more optimistic than they began. Yeah. And one of the things that they found, the difference is kids who are optimistic tend to view setbacks as temporary. And instead of an identity, say, oh, I'm unlucky, or this always happens to me, or they're after me, it's kind of paranoia. If you see the setbacks as temporary by having a longer view, then that's one of the sources of optimism and happiness is taking that little bit of a longer view.
These ideas, I'm interested how you noted them down. I mean, do you use digital media, or are you somebody who loves the analog way of doing things? Is there a secret stash of amazing thoughts in journals? As I look behind you in your bookshelf there, I'm trying. Is there anything there that I should pilfer your house for?
Yeah. Well, I have right in front of me. I have my notebook.
Yeah.
So
yes,
I do write, but here's the issue. I mean, this is I'm not exaggerating. I am unable to read my handwriting even just a couple minutes later.
Oh.
just so I have to immediately transfer them to something digital, because it looks lovely, but I cannot read it at all.
I was going to say, it looks great. it's like a mind map that I can't read, though. Yes.
Yeah, exactly right. So mostly digital, and that is actually the native home. These are part of what I'm doing here is to make these into a form that is understandable, approachable by people who live online. And so they tend to resemble tweets and little bits of things, short attention span. That's fine, because that's who it's going to. It's going to my children who, they're millennials. Someone was saying, I saw recently, I think it's true, is that we don't tend to remember books. We tend to remember sentences in books. Oh. And this is a book of sentences. So I think I'm right there.
well, that it is. One thing I'm going to come away, many things I'm going to come away with, but one in particular, rule of 3 in conversation.
Oh, yeah.
To get to the real reason, ask a person to go deeper than what they just said, then again, and then once more. The third time's answer is the closest to the truth. I'm taking that with me into my interviewing. Definitely.
It is true. This is particularly true for intimate conversations that are emotional, that are really getting to the heart of something. And the first answer is not that it's not true, it's just that it's not very deep. And the person is sort of requiring you to get there. They can't get there by themselves. No. They're actually going to depend on you to help them press. And that goes for the second round. Then there's the third round, again, where they may not be capable of actually telling you. They actually may require your help in pressing them to say more. So it's I talk about my favorite piece in the book, which is don't be the best, be the only. Don't try to be the best, which is kind of a number one. There can only be one number one. Yeah. So it's a very limited and very competitive place to be, and you're unlikely to do that because that's someone else's idea of success. What you're trying to do with becoming the only is you're trying to invent a whole new way of being successful, your own definition of success. And you're kind of headed in that way, in that direction. You asked me before about who am I? Well, I'm on my way to become the only in some ways. And here's, again, the other paradox that we talked about, the paradox of the universe. The second paradox is that you can't become yourself by yourself. It requires everyone else around you to help you become unique. That's the paradox. You can't, like you would think, well, I'm on the path to be myself, this completely unique person by yourself. No, you can't do it by yourself. You can't see where it is that you're going, who you're becoming. You need that person for the conversation to press to the third level in order for you to reveal to yourself who you are. And so that journey of becoming yourself, you can't do by yourself. You need everybody else around you. And sometimes you need someone else sitting there to take you to the third level.
Just finally, and it would feel very appropriate that should be the last piece of advice in the book, actually. You say advice like these, and you refer to the book, of course, when you're talking about advice like these are not laws. They are like hats. If one doesn't fit, try another. Although much earlier in the book, I did note down that you said, beware of hats that have more character than you.
Right. So beware of taking some advice that has more character than you do.
So of all the hats you wear, which one are you most comfortable with? And I think I may have just managed the rule of three in conversation, by the way, of the use of comfortable in the question is a barometer.
Who are you really, for the third time? What hat? And I need a hat. I always wear a hat because I'm pretty bald. And so I wear a baseball hat that has no logo. So by the way, one of the things I do is I don't wear logos on any of my clothing. What hat? Well, I think I want to wear the kindness hat, the kind hat. So whatever that hat is that's kind, that's the one I want to wear, because you cannot be too kind ever. It's just, you can always be kinder than you have been. So I want to wear the kind hat.
There we go. Kindness, being kind. You know, when all is said and done, the books and the pictures and the money and the speeches and the insert something similar in tone here, that legacy, that word, is probably the most powerful thing to be remembered by, well, above all else, really. And I guess we're always, I know I am, always a work in progress. So to some of us, including me, it's a goal as well, isn't it? Kindness and being kind. I'm looking over my glasses right now at some of the people on this planet who don't quite understand that amazing legacy right now. Today's show page for episode 381 on our website, photowalk.show, has loads of links and films to and about the stuff of life we've shared today. Or you could just follow the link in the podcast player app right now. That'll also take you there. Just, there we go, in the app. No, scroll down a bit. Down. No, not across. Go back and down. There we go. There it is. Click on that. I was hoping for a chiff-chaff, actually. I haven't got a chiff-chaff. Oh, I can see something above me. You're not a chiff-chaff, are you? No. We'll find a chiff-chaff over the next few weeks, and I can burst into my bird recognition moment. If you'd like to talk a little more together over the next week, then the Extra Mile edition, it's out. Right now, it's an hour's extra walk for you and I to enjoy together, listening to some wonderful guests. So thank you to all those that support the show. by being an extra miler. We're here because you're here, or should that be we're here because you're there? I don't know. Work in progress. Put that in the same segment as trying to be more kind. I'm helped immeasurably behind the scenes so much, and I think it's important each week I thank them personally, because they do, the names you're about to hear, do this for the love and the free, famous, not so famous flask. Neil Ford attends to the IT of my life and saves me from rebooting my kit with a hammer. Andrea Gilpin is like our head of department on the Instagram and ideas floor. Emily Renier keeps a watchful eye across our Facebook group, along now with Kelly Mitchell. Welcome along, Kelly, who constantly reminds me how good it would be to don my walking boots and visit Canada Land very soon. Our play-out song today, I think you're going to love it. I think the tone of it is just right. Well, that's if you're enjoying warmer weather. It's from Bohème, and it's called Last Summer. And we'll close with that in a moment, just to make some more pictures together as we walk along our paths. Hopefully your one is not quite so full of bugs. This week's postscript to the show is a thought, and it's a thought, of course, from Kevin Kelly. It makes perfect sense. I should have really asked him to pick out another one. I missed an opportunity there. I didn't think of that. I thought I'd just find one myself, which is what I've gone and done anyway. And it's from his new book, which I will, of course, link to. And it makes sense to use something that also refers, I think, because I like things to go around and work in circles, you know me, to the rule of three. See, I don't just throw this together, but it's a different rule of three, actually. And it ends with a word which entirely sums up our chat. So here goes. Before you speak, let your words pass through 3 gates. At the first gate, ask yourself, is it true? At the second gate, ask, is it necessary? And at the third gate, ask, is it kind?
Let's meet down at the lonely lake. Before summer has gone away. Swim out under a broken sky. Cold sun, colored with shades of white. Wave goodbye to last summer. Cold air coming away soon. So let's lay under the falling moon. Tell me something about yourself. You've never told to no one else. Say goodbye to lonely nights of last summer. Say goodbye. Say goodbye to lonely nights of last summer.
Do you hear that? It's a chiff chaff. I know there's cars in the background, can't help that. There's one with one of those ridiculous exhausts on it. Buy a Ferrari, mate, if you want to make a sound like that. Hang on a minute, let's see if we can get Chiff Chaff back again. No, he's probably been frightened off by the fake Ferrari. I've had a silent partner walk with me today on this walk. Not Barney. No, it's Thomas, my youngest. And do you remember quite a while ago I told you a story about how we were walking along a towpath one day, and he was sort of lagging behind, and he was listening to something, and I said, "What are you listening to?" And he said, "I'm listening to your podcast." And I said, "Oh, that's nice, but why do you listen to that when you can just walk up ahead and have the real thing?" And he was a bit confused. He said, "But I like listening to you." And we've been walking, and he's been wearing headphones, but I tell you what, he's not been listening to me this time. Times have changed as he grows up. What have you been listening to?
Music.
What music?
Cool music.
Cool music. Oh, you know it, don't you? I've gone past the cool stage. I have retired my coolness. See you next week.